Everyone has a past, so they say. However, Karoline Leavitt was convinced that the past never mattered. Her faith always taught about restitution, but in most cases, restitution was never really necessary unless inspired by the Spirit of God. In this case, there was no inspiration, only the truth staring at her and asking her questions. When Thomas tried to mock her faith, she wasn't ready to let it slide, but she wasn't going to give him the response he was looking for either. She knew his statement carried more weight than many knew. However, when she finally opened up, her response shook Thomas and left him and everyone else present speechless. Why did the reporter go as far as questioning Karoline Leavitt's faith, and why was she not angry? What was her response? Sitting some distance away from Thomas in the conference hall, Karoline knew the moment had come. She had always known he would question her one day, and was prepared for it, but she never expected it to be in front of so many people. What's more, Karoline never expected that Thomas would one day become a reporter. However, more than answering his questions, she wanted him to find peace. She wanted the best for him and wanted to know how she could help him. You claim you are a woman of faith, and you are also a spokeswoman for the most prominent president in the world, but do you know how many people are suffering? Thomas mocked Karoline. He sighed and continued. Do you know how many homeless people are on the street and how many people are sick without medical attention because the government is not reliable? Where is the government? People are losing their lives out there due to improper medical care. Karoline winced at those last questions because she knew they were not just questions, but personal statements coming from a painful past. She looked up at him, trying to see if she could see any sign of emotion in his eyes. At first, she saw the pain in his eyes, but in a flash, it was replaced with an empty look, one void of emotions. She made the decision then to follow what she had planned as an answer to anyone who questioned her faith about her or her work. This was not new to Karoline. As a spokeswoman to the president, she had made a name for herself. Having press conferences like this with reporters throwing mindless questions was normal, but seeing him here, she knew he was hurt. She had regretted the fact that she hurt him, but it needed to be done at that time. Karoline suddenly realized she had zoomed off in her thoughts and immediately shook it off. She was not ready to travel back to the past. It was gone and buried. Her faith had told her she was a new creation, old things had passed away, and all things had become new. She smiled, trying to remember where she got that verse from. She told herself she had to start taking her Bible reading more seriously. Karoline waved off the thoughts and returned to the main issue at hand. Thomas Kent. The name shook her all over. She knew she had to end this beef once and for all. Karoline Leavitt was a woman the entire country stood for. She was always speaking for her faith, and people admired her for that. Her faith was something she could not let anyone mock her with. According to her, her faith kept her alive for so many years through all the obstacles, so it didn't matter who or what tried to question her faith. She was ready to overlook it. As the spokeswoman to the president, she was well known for her stand in fighting against things that were not right. She stood with the president to fight against same-sex marriage until it was abolished. According to her, God created a man and a woman, and that was how it had been since and would continue to be. Thomas Kent was someone she wished would disappear from existence. He abhorred so many bitter parts of her past that she had come to let go of. She thought she was over her past, but a part of her knew that as long as he was alive and around her, her past was not over. She didn't want her past haunting her, so she decided to address everything once and for all. She needed to let him understand that she was not the same person she used to be, and the new life she was living was her life now. Who was Thomas Kent, and why did he matter so much to her? What was it about her past that she despised so much? Thinking of it, she didn't know how to go about it. She knew that Thomas needed the truth, and she was going to give it to him so he could redirect himself and find peace within. The problem was how she would bring herself to talk about the past all over again. She recalled when she discovered Thomas worked for one of the best news agencies. A part of her wanted to think he had finally moved on with life and started living well, but she knew well that bitterness was a stumbling block, and Thomas had harbored bitterness for a long time. She and Thomas were born into rigid and strict Christian homes. The difference between their faiths then and now was that they never practiced the freedom Christ brought. Her family, although strict and devout, was not bad, unlike Thomas's family. Her father took into consideration their needs and provided them as when due. He expected his children to be workers in the church, and he expected them to be the best in all they did, without making mistakes, at least not visible ones that would taint his image as a deacon. Her mother was a loyal wife, the one that would not hesitate to tell her husband her children's misdeeds. Her family's only fault was that there were no emotions shared. She was grateful she found the real meaning of her faith and was able to reconnect with her siblings, and it wasn't as tough as she had thought it would be. It turned out her siblings too knew about how love was paramount in a Christian home. Compared to Thomas's family, they were way better. The comparison? Unlike her father, who was just a devout Christian, Thomas's father was the man on the pulpit. He was the pastor in charge of the church Karoline and her family attended. Thomas's family moved to the downtown side of Olivetown when Karoline was 18 after their former pastor was transferred. His father, Pastor Taylor, was loved by every parent because of his strict approach to teenagers and youths. Even Karoline believed he was the best pastor to curb the youths, and her father thought the same, but it wasn't a problem to her because she was not a rebellious child who needed curbing. All her life, she was very obedient and wasn't one to say no to her parents. She always tried her best to meet her parents' expectations, so her new pastor was not a problem for her. When Thomas came with his father to the new parish, he was a year older than she was. He was the talk of every youth, mostly the ladies, because of his handsome face and well-structured height. She also knew Thomas was handsome, but he rarely smiled, and at every service, he looked like he would rather be anywhere else than listening to his father preach on the altar. At first, people thought it was because he had to relocate from one place to another, and he probably didn't like his new environment. They felt he missed his old life, which was why he was looking so sad on the first Sunday. However, they later discovered that the look on his face was a permanent look he wore every day of his life, and he didn't care about it. Thomas started attending the same high school as Karoline, and even at school, he was still detached, quiet, and rude to people who tried talking to him, despite seeing the atmosphere he carried around him. Clark, his friend, was the only one always seen around him. Rumor, still unconfirmed, said their friendship started from a big fight. She remembered that after hearing those rumors, she decided not to even have eye contact with him. She was very disappointed because his father was a pastor. Was he not supposed to leave like his father, a man of honor? They finally met one day when her father took her to the pastor's house to drop off some items, as that was the norm among the church members. One thing she noticed was that the pastor's wife was way different. Karoline knew her mother was loyal to a fault, but the pastor's wife looked like living was an issue. She was alive, but not living. In church services, she always looked vibrant, but that very day, she looked different. Also, when they arrived, she could swear she saw the pastor give his wife a glare that passed as deadly. The woman went back inside like a wounded dog and didn't come out till they left, but that wasn't the highlight of their visit. She decided to look around the pastor's house while her father and the pastor were discussing. While moving around, she was met with a deadly glare. This time, she was sure it was a deadly glare from Thomas, who looked at her like she was trash. She said hi to him, and he just looked at her like she was trespassing. She didn't want any more issues, so she walked back to where her father was, and they left after a short while. What happened kept replaying in her head until she went home. She soon forgot about it until the next day at school, when she saw him. He did not see her, but when he did, a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. She figured he knew who she was at that moment, but he just walked off. She didn't mind, of course, as she didn't want to talk to him either. He was always looking troubled while she was here, calm and collected. What she dreamed of all her life was to leave the town and make a name for herself. Deep down, she knew this town was not for her. It was like a cage, and she couldn't wait to get out of it. Knowing this, she perfected all her grades to ensure she didn't waste time after high school. She knew she would easily gain admission into a university far away and leave. Thomas and his mom came to visit their house during the holiday, and they prepared for their visit. Her father nervously gave orders to her mother to ensure the pastor's wife had a comfortable stay at the house. When Thomas and his mother arrived, Karoline's mother asked her to take Thomas out for a stroll, and Thomas followed her. She whispered hi to him once again, but this time he didn't even look at her. Immediately, she let out a curse word. Realizing what she had just done, she covered her mouth with her hand. She was so shocked, wondering why she even made that statement. She was not one to easily get riled. His reaction to her curse word was the beginning of their friendship. He laughed and said, "So the mouth can say a curse? You're such a mouse." Interestingly, she responded, asking why he would call her a mouse. He claimed she was a mouse because she lived like a mouse, quiet and calm, but still living like a mouse in a cage. She looked at his analogy, wondering how he could quickly decipher her. Was she that open to reading, she thought? Still, She said she was no mouse. And thereafter, they had a little conversation before saying goodbye. They became friends after that. Even at church the next day, he waved at her but never smiled. She thought maybe he didn't know how to smile because his deadpan face looked like it had never smiled before. Thomas's mom and her mom became friends in a short while, and they both frequently visited each other. Meanwhile, she and Thomas were also friends, and they always talked and stayed together most of the time. Thomas knew everything about her, but she didn't know a thing about him. All she knew was that he hated his father, although she didn't know why. She knew he hated his father so much that she thought within her that maybe Thomas could harm his father if given the chance. She laughed that thought off, knowing that it wouldn't come to that. His father's name could turn his mood from 100 to 0 at a go. Another thing she knew was that he loved his mother, as if his life depended on it. She was always itching to ask him why he hated his father, and she got the answer one day. That particular day, she got injured in school due to game practice, so she could go home early. On getting home, she met a bruised Thomas's mom and her mom. Her mom was fixing the injuries on her face, while Thomas's mom was almost naked, so she could see bruises all over her body. When Karoline stepped into the house, she heard Thomas's mom say, "He doesn't touch my face, but today he was so angry." Immediately, she realized why Thomas hated his father. He had a temper and lashed out at his wife at every slight provocation. Karoline did not necessarily like her pastor, but at least she respected him. After eavesdropping on their conversation, she ran back to school and foolishly told Thomas. Well, that was a very silly move because Thomas immediately ran to Karoline's house. On getting there, he met his mother, who was already cleaned up. Seeing the look on his face, his mother knew he was aware of the recent one. He was raging about how he wanted to destroy his father, but his mother asked him to calm down. When everything died down, Karoline's mother scolded her for telling Thomas. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. I was just surprised, and the only thing I could think of was to let him know." Karoline defended herself. "You shouldn't have done that," her mother scolded. "It won't happen again," Karoline said while crying. Later that evening, Thomas and his mom were ready to leave, but before then, Karoline's mom asked what their next move was. "What can I do? There's nothing to be done. In fact, nothing can be done. My husband is a renowned pastor, and no one would believe such allegations against him. I'm at the receiving end. If I speak up, things will get worse," Thomas's mom said with tears in her eyes. Karoline knew Thomas's mom wasn't ready to tell people what was happening in her home. Even if she had the opportunity, she would never report her husband. She confirmed this when Thomas told her his mom would never call the cops on his father. According to the pastor, Thomas was rebellious. He and his father always had one issue after another. Thomas once confessed that he had never smiled at his father because, all his life, he had always seen his father hit his mother. The painful thing was that his mother always supported his father, saying, "Don't be angry at your father. I'm the one who's wrong. He's just correcting me." Thomas said he was always going against his father, and he decided to be in church, keep quiet, and do his father's bidding because whenever he misbehaved, his father always punished his mother for it. That was the only way he could get to him. I honestly thought the mistreatment had stopped because I didn't witness him hit her for a while. I didn't know he always waited for me to leave for school before he would let the monster in him out. Mom, of course, never said anything about it to me. She'll always choose to protect her husband's image while risking her life. Thomas confessed to Karoline. His father would never touch his mother's face to avoid issues that would destroy his reputation as a pastor. Thomas believed his father was the devil himself. Thomas said he never really believed in God and felt God was not real. Is this really how the holy God everybody claims to worship is? He allows his so-called servants to treat their wives in such inhumane ways, Thomas lamented. Karoline told him not all men of God were like his father. She tried as much as possible to open Thomas's eyes to the truth about God. But that didn't mean he accepted it right away. He tried fighting the urge to believe, but Karoline never stopped. Gradually, Thomas stopped blaming God for his father's ugly actions. However, none of them knew what was coming. Tragedy struck during their last year in school. One day, Thomas came running into Karoline's house with blood all over him, explaining how he had discovered his mother in a pool of her blood with no reasonable explanation of what had happened. However, Thomas, Karoline, and her mum knew who was responsible. When she was rushed to the hospital, his mum looked lifeless, but they were still hopeful because the machine was still beeping. The doctors confirmed that she had internal bleeding, yet they had not started working on her. The police were also around, and Karoline thought this was the perfect time to expose the cruelty of Thomas's father, but that would be after the doctor runs the tests to confirm a case of mistreatment. Unfortunately, the doctor was nowhere around. Everything seemed to be working against them, and there was no way to save Thomas's mother. Just then, Karoline felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Thomas. He signaled for her to follow him outside. "Please, let's go to church. Teach me how to pray. I want to pray to God to help my mother out of this terrible situation," Thomas pleaded. While at the church, Karoline noticed Thomas crying for the first time. They held hands and prayed, asking God to intervene. Karoline even overheard Thomas promise to surrender his life to God if he saved his mother. After praying, they walked back to the hospital only to discover his mother had passed away a few hours before they arrived. Karoline saw Thomas's father crying, wondering how low he was to even fake his tears. What surprised her most was that many people were sympathizing with him, but no one thought of Thomas. During and after the burial, she was with Thomas, and he did not say a word or show any sign of grief, and that was her fear. All she wanted was for him to show at least a single emotion, but he was just blank. No one could tell what was going on in his mind. The only time she saw him give an emotion was during the burial, when they were laying his mother to rest, and his father burst out crying. Thomas looked like he wanted to push his father into the coffin. Thankfully, Karoline was quick enough to hold his hands to stop him from doing whatever he was thinking. Thomas became very cold to everyone, including her, but she did not leave his side. She knew he was mourning, and leaving him was wrong. However, the moment he shut her out, she gave him space. A month after they graduated, she no longer saw Thomas, and even when he was in school during their last exams, he sat at the far end. It was their Thanksgiving Sunday after graduation. Thomas stormed into the church while his father was preaching and referred to him as the devil, accusing him of taking his mother's life. Everyone was shocked. Yet no one believed him. He looked at Karoline to help him confirm the truth, but one look from her mother, and she knew better not to say anything. That moment, she saw betrayal splash across Thomas's face. He left the church and the town, and that was the last time she saw him until she got into a heated conversation with him, and he tried mocking her faith. As if revived from the past, Karoline looked at Thomas and responded to the question he had asked about the government being unaware or not caring about the happenings in the country. The country's situation was not spoiled by one government. It was a series of governments, so only one government cannot fix the entire country, but they can try to make a big amendment. She looked at him and said, "I am sorry the government failed you, but God never fails. Whatever happened to you had human choices in them, not God's." Immediately, the entire room clapped for her for the wonderful answer she had given. She looked at Thomas and saw a defeated look, but she knew she had to reach out and help him find peace again. What do you think of Karoline's response to Thomas's mockery of her faith? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you learned anything from this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Also, turn on your notification bell for notifications about new videos. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.